6. Today, we're going to be talking about why feedback is so important as an entrepreneur and how blocking out feedback or not kind of going after feedback can be detrimental to your business and your entrepreneur journey. So, I think a lot of founders don't fail because their idea is bad, but a lot of times they fail because they're trying to protect their ego. And that comes in the form of a lot of different things. For one, being humble and getting yourself out there in front of people and putting yourself out there, kind of have to do a little ego check there, but also in receiving feedback. Now, there's also a difference between, you know, hearing feedback and actually taking it into account. And it's difficult as a business owner because you feel that you know what's best for your business. You feel that this was your idea. You're the one that knows, what to do, what's going on. But you always got to take feedback from not only customers, but also non-customers, meaning the people who didn't purchase your product, people who are a lead but never actually purchased it, and also your staff and your team. So it's not just customers we want feedback from. It's also non-customers. It's also our staff. It's our team. Anybody who can give us any insight into the business, we want to listen to. In any insight into our product or service, we want to listen to and actually listen and take it into consideration. And this is something that took me time to, master as an entrepreneur, of being able to take people's advice and really listen to it and really think about it instead of just kind of reject it right off the top and hey, they don't know what they're talking about. I know what's going on. It's somewhat of a difficult thing to let go of as an entrepreneur, to let go of I'm not the only one that knows what's going on. Other people may have great insight into how we could make this company better, how we could make our product or service better. And so when people tell me and take the time to give me advice or give me feedback, that I appreciate that and then I actually take it into consideration. So very important for entrepreneurs to do that. Again, it's something that took me time to do. It's something I still work on every day because again, you're so in it. And when somebody that's maybe a little bit more outside of it tries to give you some feedback, sometimes it's, you put up you get defensive or dismissive. And that's the opposite of what we want to be doing. We want to take everybody's feedback into consideration. One of my favorite speakers, Jim Rohn, always says you could stay up all night and not think of that, right? This is somebody else's thoughts. And so they're very important to take into consideration as an entrepreneur when people have thoughts and feedback regarding your product, your service, or your business. I think one of the challenges of receiving feedback in a positive way is that it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like people are critiquing you. Sometimes it feels negative, and sometimes people put the feedback in a negative way, but that's okay. Now, especially when you're talking about customers, negative feedback may make you feel defensive over your business, especially if you're the one that's kind of like on the phones and talking directly to customers. Sometimes them saying something about your business can, put you in a defensive mode, but you really need to listen and pay attention to what they're talking about because it is, although it's uncomfortable for you to hear, it's very important for you to hear the potential flaws in your product or service, the things that your business may be doing wrong. And upset customers are a great way to get feedback. Happy customers, obviously a great way to get feedback, but typically the negative customers are pointing out the actual problems, the pinch points in your business that you really need to know about. And the more negative feedback you get, the more it's going to be glaring at you right in the face what needs to be fixed. So very important, don't get defensive when people are trying to give you feedback, even if it's negative feedback. At the end of the day, when you buy a product or service and you're not happy with it, you give negative feedback as well. And you're not taking into consideration that the person you're giving that feedback to, it may be their dream and their whole dreams and hopes are wrapped up in this business. That doesn't matter to you when you're the customer. If you're not happy, you're going to complain. So don't get defensive and say, oh, they don't know this. I've sacrificed everything for this business. Well, they're the customer, right? So if they're upset, you want that feedback. You want to know that. So some entrepreneurs tend to shut out the negative feedback, but it's very important to look at that negative feedback, especially if you have staff members, because a lot of the time the negative feedback is going to be how that customer was treated by one of your staff members. And it's very important to stay on top of that and know what staff members may or may not be treating your customers properly. It When you don't take, if you're not going out there and seeking feedback, if you're not out there seeking feedback actively, it feels more safe. When you go out there and really seek feedback, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's going to feel a little bit more unsafe, a little bit out of your comfort zone. But again, that's always where the good things come from, is when you push yourself outside of your comfort zone. If you're not actively seeking feedback, or if you're closing off feedback when people are trying to give it to you, at the end of the day, you're going to kill your progress because you're not really seeing the full picture. How can you run your business, grow your business, and take your business to the next level if you're not seeing the full picture of your business and not getting feedback, excuse me, not seeking feedback, not taking feedback into consideration? Those are things that are going to keep you from seeing the full picture of your business. And how could you grow or expand your business when you're not looking at the full picture? It's just not going to happen. So you have to take all this into consideration and understand that it's part of this, right? Feedback from customers, from your team, it's all part of the process of building your business and expanding your business. So what can we avoid when we're, uh, feedback here? Well, for one, we're not going to be confrontational when we're getting this feedback. So this especially applies to if you're trying to get feedback from non-customers, which is a great thing to do, to get feedback from people who were a lead, who came in the system, who saw the product or service, but they didn't actually end up purchasing it. But when you reach out to those people, obviously you're not going to be confrontational, right? You're not going to say, why didn't you buy it? It's the best service. You're really, out of curiosity, trying to get their feedback. And so definitely, don't be confrontational when you're seeking out the feedback, just like you can't be defensive when people are giving you the feedback. Also make sure that you're not just asking your friends and family for opinions. Getting feedback from your friends and family is great, especially in the beginning when they may be the only people that you know to purchase your product or service, or they can give you feedback on it. But when we say go seek feedback, we're talking about people outside of your immediate circle that can give you actual, independent, non-biased feedback. And, just keep in mind that silence feels peaceful. Not getting negative feedback seems peaceful, but it's expensive because it's going to cost you if you're not really looking at the full picture of your business, which includes positive and negative feedback. So feedback is one of these things in business that can speed up a timeline. So what I mean by that is that getting feedback from customers can save you a year, for example, of trying to figure something out. If you're not receiving feedback from customers, it could take you a year to figure out that this is what's actually happening behind the scenes. This is why our conversion rate is so low, or why people aren't buying it, or why people are returning it so much, whatever the case is, or giving bad reviews. If you're not getting that feedback, looking at those reviews, seeking out the feedback, it can take you a long time to figure this out. When really, if you were seeking feedback, if you were reading all the reviews, if you were reaching out to customers and non-customers and your staff members, you could figure that out within maybe a week or two. But it could take you a whole year to come to that conclusion if you're just kind of waiting to see the results of it. So feedback can help you really condense that timeline of seeing where something is going before you have to wait a long time to see the negative consequences of it. So it's definitely a huge thing to be able to shorten that timeline of knowing what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong and where this road is leading you to. Because if you're just kind of tuned out and you're in your own world and you're just head down going, a year from now you could say, wow, I finally get it, people don't like it because of this reason. Well, if you called 10 customers a year ago, you would have came to the same conclusion when you spoke to all of them and they all 10 told you the same thing or about the same thing, whatever it is. So remember that feedback can really condense your timeline and can really transform your business a lot quicker than you think. And again, you're not going to know that you're missing out on that, that sped up timeline, but it is happening if you're using feedback properly. If you're open to getting feedback, that's going to condense that timeline of figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and where your company is heading, and if that's going in the right direction. So when we're listening to feedback, when we're trying to get feedback, we kind of need to determine what is useful feedback and what is just noise. Part of this is when you're looking at a bad review. When you get an email from a customer or there's a review on a website and it's very bad. It's easy to be dismissive of these bad reviews when people are super angry. They're saying a lot of things that don't necessarily have to do with the core of the problem. They are all caps and maybe cursing and calling names and all this kind of stuff. It's easy to dismiss those reviews as, oh, this person's just upset. What you want to do is still look at the review, still read the review, look past all of the yelling and make sure you understand the core of the problem. It's so easy to dismiss a bad review by saying that person's just salty, they're just angry, they just don't get it. They just don't understand how our policies work. Whatever it is, you need to not go down that road. You need to look at the comment and look at the core problem that they were facing, the core issue at hand. You can ignore all the noise, right? All the extras, the all caps, the names calling, all that kind of stuff. But you need to make sure you don't dismiss it. Be very attentive to, okay, they said a lot in this review, but what was their core issue? And is this something that we can fix? I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when we look at reviews of our own company, product, or service, we're kind of looking to, you know, we're not looking to hold ourselves accountable necessarily. We're kind of looking for what we want, right? We need to be looking for what we can do better, not looking through it and saying, yes, that was a good review. Oh, this bad review, that person just doesn't get it. They don't know how our product or service works. They don't know what our return policy is. So that's why they're upset. What you should be looking at is, what can I do to make our return policy more clear? Because we've gotten a couple negative reviews about it, instead of brushing it off on saying, oh, these people don't read, they don't know how this works. We could say, hey, how could we make this policy more clear so that we don't have this same outcome in the future? So don't be dismissive of reviews. Make sure to look past all the negativity and noise that some people may have when they're frustrated with a product or service, and say, okay, I understand they were upset, but what was the real core issue that they were upset about? And how can we help fix that so that other people don't have that problem in the future? And it sounds simple, but it's not as easy when you're the actual business owner and you take this personal. And this is human psychology. You're looking through these bad reviews, you're angry at these people instead of being happy that they're giving you feedback that can help your business. So any review for you as a business owner, any review that you get should be a positive for you, even if it's a negative review, because you're getting reviews, you're getting action, you're getting feedback. And that's what's important. And it's important to not only receive that feedback, but really hear it, really take it in, and then say, what can I do that's constructive with this feedback? Even if it's the most negative, non-constructive feedback ever. Okay, but let's look at the core issue and what can I do to help that core issue so that it doesn't happen more or that people feel better about it. At the end of the day, that's what's important, is just looking through all the negativity and finding what their issue is so that you can react to it in a positive way. So let's talk about how we can build feedback into our business. So obviously everybody knows how businesses, especially retail, you go there and they'll tell you there's a survey, a website to take a survey at the bottom of the receipt. You know, these are the type of things that larger corporations try to do to get feedback. Obviously most of the time people are only going to take the time to go there if they have a very negative experience. In a smaller business, we usually have an opportunity to get a lot more personal feedback, especially if we're in some kind of business that has sales over the phone, or if we're the type of company that relies heavily on reviews, if we're listed on Google or Yelp, or these different platforms that are going to give you reviews. We can typically get those more direct and really dive deeper into them when we're a smaller business as opposed to a gigantic corporation. But it's very important to try to set those up in your business. So you should look at your business and actively think, at what points can I put in opportunities to get feedback? So can I send an email to my customers and offer them something to fill out a feedback form? Can I make it so that when they purchase their product or service, that confirmation email also asks them to give us feedback? What can we do to encourage feedback, whether it's positive or negative? Can we offer something for free? Whatever the situation is. But I think the best thing to do is start building it into your business. As far as, like I said, the confirmation email that somebody gets when they purchase the product or service, you should insert that opportunity to get feedback there, some kind of link to a form, especially if you can offer them some kind of incentive, or some kind of link to the Google or wherever you're seeking to have them post reviews at. Try to implement it into the process of your business, into your sales process, because that's going to give you the best chance and opportunity to get the most feedback. Also, if you're calling people and you're on sales calls, you can get direct feedback. Or if you sold people something, you can always call them later just to check in and say, hey, just making sure that you're enjoying your product or your service. Do you have any feedback for us? Is there anything else we can help you with? Which is also obviously a great time to resell, upsell, all that kind of good stuff. So not only is feedback important to get for the future of your business and to get that feedback and improve your business, but getting feedback oftentimes opens up the door to resell or upsell that customer, which will further your business as well. All right, let's go ahead and open it up to questions then here. We are live on all the different platforms. You can drop any questions you have in the chat. You can also DM me any questions at Kyle Hiersche and at Founding Without Funding. I have a couple questions here that were sent to me earlier. Let me go ahead and get into them. Matt is asking, how do you ask for feedback without sounding desperate or insecure? So how do you ask for feedback without sounding desperate? Well, I think just, offering it in the type of process, right? So if it's inserted into your business process, I think it's not desperate. It's just something that's there, right? When they get the confirmation email that says that they've secured their product or service or whatever it is, have a link there, follow up later with maybe an automated email. Maybe later when you call them, have a salesperson call them later and check in with them and say, hey, do you have any feedback for us? And then of course, that's the opportunity to upsell them or resell them, or get referrals, depending on what kind of business you're in. If it's a referral type business, that's great as well. So I don't think you have to be desperate in any way. You just want to take a step back and look at your business and say, okay, at what points in the processes can I insert a place for people to give feedback? And if you do that on the larger scale, I don't think you have to be desperate to get the feedback from any one person. As long as it's implemented into your system in one or a few places, By the time you're turning out all these customers, some people are going to naturally do it and some people, may not. But you don't have to be like desperate to get feedback from one person or feel insecure about it. Just figure out how and where they're going to give you that feedback and insert that into your processes. And then you don't have to be desperate for it. It's just going to naturally occur as long as you've inserted it into the process in some points where people, it's, prevalent enough for people to, you know, to do it. Okay. Alyssa is asking, I avoid asking people what they think because I'm scared to kill my motivation. How do you deal with that? So, how do you deal with people giving negative feedback, killing your motivation? Well, I think it should power your motivation. I think you should look at it as a positive. So, negative feedback, yes, I understand. Sometimes it gets us down. Sometimes it kind of kills our motivation. But I think we need to look at it differently and we need to let it fuel our motivation to fix the problem. You could even let it fuel the motivation by proving them wrong, right? That sometimes is motivation. Oh, that person says I have a crappy business or that I'm a bad business owner. Well, I'm going to prove them wrong. But here's the thing, don't do it in a way where it's negative and you're just pushing back on the feedback. Receive the feedback, listen to it, hear it, break it down. What did they say? Even if they're being a hater and being negative, what did they say that is true? What is the core of the problem that they actually had an issue with? I'm going to fix that. And then I'm going to work my butt off to prove them wrong and show that I do have a great business. But don't skip past that problem, or don't skip past the part of solving the problem that they had brought up in the first place, right? So I would say as your motivation, it should be negative review. What is the core problem? And use that as motivation to fix your business. And if it's a really negative review and it kind of just makes you angry and you want to prove somebody wrong, again, fix the core issue and then use it as motivation to prove them wrong and saying, they said I'm a bad, business person or our company sucks, but I fixed that issue and now I'm going to go take this to the world and I'm going to prove to them and everybody else that I do have a great business and we do know what we're doing. So as opposed to letting it kill your momentum and motivation, I would let it power your motivation. But at the same time, don't skip past the core issue on what that review was regarding. Okay, question from Chris. What if the feedback you get is all over the place and contradicts itself? So if you get feedback that's kind of all over the place and contradicting itself, just try to break down the core of what is relative to your business. If they say something positive about this part, if they say something negative about this part, you know, some people may have mixed feelings. They may say that this part was good and this part was bad. Or a lot of times people will say, I had a bad experience with the company, but the person I talked to was great. Or they may say the person I talked to was terrible, but I like the company and I like the product or service. So some people's reviews may be kind of all over the place because they had an experience that was all over the place. Maybe they hated the person they talked to, but they loved the actual product or service. Or maybe it's vice versa. So just try to pick out what is applicable to each situation and try to look at that as the feedback. Okay. Question here from Lauren. How do you know when to listen to feedback and when to ignore it? Always listen to feedback. Don't ignore the feedback. Even if it's negative feedback, even if you think it's not much feedback, even if you think it's not constructive feedback, remember, it's nobody's job to give us constructive feedback. When you do a review on a business, are you sitting there worried about giving them constructive feedback when you're doing it? No, typically you're upset. Most reviews come when people are upset. And even if it's a positive review, you're not sitting there thinking, how could I write this review in a way that's constructive feedback for them? No, you're just going to write the review. So just remember what you do yourself as a customer of a company when you're giving feedback. It's the same thing that people are going to do to you. So you just need to find what you think is relevant to your situation and look at what you may think is not that relevant. But if it's not that relevant, then it's not much you need to think about. But if it is relevant, you should be thinking about it a lot and trying to fix that problem. All right, we'll take one last question here. Is feedback from people who didn't buy still useful? Yes, absolutely. Feedback from people who didn't buy your product or service may be better than feedback from people who did, especially in a lead type business and a sales type business where we have a lot of leads, but a lot of them haven't converted to customers yet. That's an amazing pool of people to call, email, really call is the best thing to get their feedback on why they didn't purchase the product or service. And a few things happens there. You get amazing feedback on why they didn't purchase the product or service, or they never even got the information on the product or service. So now you're going to resend it to them and end up selling them, or you're going to resell the product or service to them or upsell a new product or service to them. So the act itself of reaching out to people who are in your database but did not purchase not only gives you feedback, but will also help generate sales. It'll generate people buying the product again. It'll generate people upselling the product, and it'll generate people who, when you call them, they go, "Oh, I didn't even get the information. Yeah, I signed up for the info, but I never saw it." And then okay, well, let me resend you the information then, and we can, talk again at that point. So that drives sales a lot. So absolutely, getting feedback from non-customers is extremely valuable, figuring out why they did not buy. And then again, when you're in the process of doing those calls and following up with those people, it's inevitably going to generate more sales. So very important there. All right. Well, that being said, we will go ahead and wrap it up for today. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode of the Founding with